Mr. Speaker. In the fog of war, nothing is more important than information to make sound decisions on the battlefield. Information is the difference between life and death, success and failure. To fight this pandemic, we need information to navigate the uncertainty and position for recovery. But this government is waging a relentless campaign to restrict, delay and deny access to critical information. The Liberals won't answer questions, they paralyze committees, shut down debate and refuse to provide a budget. The Parliamentary Budget Officer doesn't have the information to track government spending. Access to information laws are being ignored, with less than half of federal agencies processing information requests. The information exists, but the Liberals won't release it. Information is power. The Liberals must give the power of government information to all Canadians. We can't survive this crisis without it.
We look forward to welcoming President Biden and Vice President Harris to Canada. Oh, thank you, Mr.
Oral questions. Question orale. The honourable member for Portage-Lister.
Mr. Speaker, Canada's economy was showing signs of trouble before COVID-19 hit, with record debt and out-of-control spending. In fact, in March of this year, prior to COVID, Canada lost over 1 million jobs, many of those in the energy sector. Since 2015, energy workers have been abandoned by this government. So when Keystone XL was approved in the U.S. in March of 2017, there was once again a glimmer of hope for Canadian workers. Those hopes are now at risk. What will the Prime Minister do to ensure that the Keystone XL project moves ahead in the United States?
Honourable Minister.
Speaker, let me be very clear to energy sector workers, especially those in Alberta who are worried about the future of this project. Our government has been and will be unwavering in its support for Keystone XL. We have been and will continue to advocate for this project to the U.S. government. In fact, the Prime Minister discussed this project on his very first call with the President-elect. Keystone is a good project. We support it. There are 1,500 Canadians working on it as we speak. We support them. Sorry, Mr. Speaker.
I'd like to remind the honourable members to turn off their microphones, mute themselves. J'aimerais rappeler aux députés.
I'd like to remind members to turn off their microphones, to mute themselves, please.
Madame Chabot, s'il vous plaît, mettez votre microphone.
Ms. Chabot, please mute your microphone.
OK, on a un petit problème, un des microphones.
We have a problem with a microphone then.
Member for Portage-Lister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But here's the problem with the Liberals' answer. The Prime Minister said that he wants to phase out the oil sands. He said that in 2017. He attacked pipelines with Bill C-69. He implemented a tanker ban and a job-killing carbon tax. That has meant thousands of jobs lost in the West. Losing Keystone would mean at least 2,800 more jobs lost. So, what is the Prime Minister's plan to ensure that the Keystone XL project goes ahead so that more Canadian jobs are not lost?
Yeah. The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister raised this issue with the President-elect on the very, very first call. We have been clear. There is a very, very strong argument for this project, and that continues regardless of who the President of the United States is. We will continue to make that argument. I would say that one of the strongest arguments for this project is that we have a government that is fighting climate change, that is putting a price on pollution, is making investments to help our energy sector become more sustainable than ever. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
The Honourable Member for Portage-Lister.
Well, recently, when asked if a Biden victory would mean the end of Keystone XL, the Prime Minister abdicated, saying, well, that's a question for Mr. Biden. This defeatist tone is unacceptable and provides no reassurances that he will actually fight on behalf of energy workers for this project to move forward. The success of Keystone XL would create 2,800 Canadian jobs and indirectly support 15,000 additional jobs. With the current COVID crisis, these jobs are more important than ever. So again, what is the Prime Minister's plan to ensure that KXL is not cancelled?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let me quote, one of the real problems that I think lingers over Keystone XL is, before the pipeline question arose, the Harper government deliberately went out of its way to be seen as adversary of environmentalists. Who said that, Mr. Speaker? The former Progressive Conservative Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, and member of Calgary Centre, the Right Honourable Joe Clark. I'll look over to the other side. The record of inaction and failure on the environment nearly doomed this project, Mr. Speaker. We have been unwavering in our support for Keystone. Speaker. We don't need any advice for the opposition.
Now, I believe the honourable member for Calgary, Edmonton, I'm sorry, please, you have a point of order?
Yes, I can barely hear the Parliamentary Secretary.
Yes, the Parliamentary Secretary, it sounds like there's a bad connection there. I would ask him to look into that, but if that's a good point of order. I just want to remind all the members, excuse me, order? Order? If I can have your attention for a moment. I just want to remind all the members, not only in the House, but especially the ones joining us virtually, to make sure that they're in a place where they have good connection so that we can hear everything they have to say. Everyone is just waiting with bated breath to hear their answers. The Honourable Député de Louis.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm very proud to be the member for Louis Saint-Laurent, but I'm not very proud at all of the member for Saint-Laurent. Last Thursday, I was at Parliamentary Committee, and she had the gall to question the fragility of French in Montreal. I'll quote her, and she said in English, "I need to see it to believe it." And in a sarcastic tone, she did this and talked about the decline of French in Montreal. It doesn't take a genius to understand that French is in a fragile state in Montreal. Can the Prime Minister, the member of Papineau, and the neighbour to the member for Saint-Laurent explain to her that she's completely out in left field? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Both official languages are extremely important. We acknowledge that French is a minority language in North America and Canada, and that there is a decline, and as a result, we must do more to protect French in Canada and throughout Quebec. In the throne speech, for the first time, we have committed to addressing this issue to resolve
Dans les circonstances, nous allons
and in the circumstances, we will be protecting both official languages.
Is it a point of order? Normally, we don't have point of orders during the question period unless it's a technical issue.
It's a technical issue in that the translation and the French were of the same volume and incomprehensible.
Okay, very good. I want to remind
members.
Make sure you're on the button. You've switched on the language that you're speaking in.
Through the process since 2016, 10% are visible minorities, 5% are LGBTQ. There are Indigenous members, and more than 50% are women. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. During the first wave of COVID-19, conditions in long-term healthcare facilities were atrocious. Lives were lost. We had to send in the army. Now cases are on the rise, and the same conditions continue. Public health experts are demanding that the government establish a national standard of care for long-term care centres. Why is the Prime Minister dragging his feet instead of protecting our seniors?
Le Ministre.
The Honourable Minister.
Speaker, and I share the member opposite's concern about the growing number of cases across the country, and we're working with all levels of government to make sure that we support people who are vulnerable from COVID-19. And I'll just say this, Mr. Speaker, we actually in the Safe Restart contributed $740 million to provinces and territories to strengthen their protections for long-term care home, and we committed to the creation of national standards with provinces and territories. We'll do that work, Mr. Speaker, together with the provinces and territories, who then will have better ability to deliver on their healthcare responsibilities.
Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Well, those national standards need to come quickly. We're seeing long-term care outbreaks across this country. In particular, for-profit long-term care centers are the site of the worst conditions, and Rivera-owned sites owned by the federal government are where some of the worst conditions are happening in Edmonton, in Winnipeg, and in Scarborough. In Winnipeg, paramedics arrived at a Rivera-owned long-term care home and found seniors left dead in their beds for hours. Will the Prime Minister commit today, once and for all, to remove profit from the care of our seniors?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I share the member opposite's deep concern that care for seniors has to be paramount for all of us. No matter what level of government we're at, we have to care about the dignity and safety of the seniors that are amongst us in our communities. And that's why we've been supporting provinces and territories, Mr. Speaker, to deliver on their responsibility. $740 million through the Safe Restart Agreement, additional supports through deployment of Canadian Red Cross, including into Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec. Mr. Speaker, we'll be there for the provinces and territories as they work to protect long-term care residents from COVID-19.
Honourable Député de Chabot-Saint-Charles.
The Honourable Member for Charlotte.
Canadians continue to face a growing COVID pandemic. Suicide rates are growing at an alarming rate. Last week, the Prime Minister encouraged Canadians who are feeling anxious or overwhelmed to call 211. For the record, 211 is not a suicide prevention hotline. It's a directory and may not even be available across our country. That's the equivalent of dialing 911 during an emergency and getting a recording or being put on hold. When minutes count, direct access can make the difference between a life saved or a life lost. Will the Prime Minister take real action, join Conservatives, ensure that our 988 motion will pass?
The Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I want to just share with the member opposite that I also am deeply concerned about the mental health of Canadians, in particular during COVID-19, but at all times. And we know that suicide prevention is so critically important. The member opposite knows I want to work with him on making sure that we have better and more rapid access to supports wherever a person is in this country. We know that when people reach out, they are often in their worst moments and they need immediate help. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Caribou Prince George.
So, to be clear, Mr. Speaker, through you, I'm asking the Minister for clarity. The motion has been tabled. If we sought unanimous consent, would the Minister seek that this motion would pass right now?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, when a motion receives unanimous consent by the House of Commons, of course, that's a very important measure to move forward. But listen, as I said to the member, I will work with his office tirelessly to make sure that we see his reality of better access to immediate care for people who are worrying about their mental health, who are considering suicide as a way to end their suffering. This is not acceptable, Mr. Speaker, that people have to wait for that help.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Over the last week, many parts of Canada have seen record-breaking numbers of COVID cases. The Liberals didn't even consider rapid tests until we were already well into the second wave. We needed to have the capacity to be testing, tracing, and isolating when provinces had 70 cases a day, not 1,400. After 10 months, hundreds of billions of dollars spent, thousands of lives and millions of jobs and businesses lost, and no action, the Liberals have put Canadians in harm's way. Why?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I share the member opposite's concern about the rapid growth of cases across the country. In fact, spent numerous hours this weekend speaking with health ministers across the country to make sure that they had what they need to combat the growth. In fact, we've shipped over 4.2 million rapid tests to provinces and territories to date, over 1.7 million to Ontario, 1.2 million to Quebec, 345,000 to BC, and we stand ready to help those provinces and territories with whatever they need to combat COVID-19.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Mr. Speaker, that's a drop in the bucket, and they should have been in place months ago. The Liberals wasted the summer trying to figure out how to get out of the WE scandal instead of getting these rapid tests. Canadians should have access to rapid tests now and a plan on vaccine distribution. Will the Prime Minister admit that these failures are why he's asking Canadians to cancel Christmas and saying some regions will get support for COVID, but not others?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, every step of the way, we've been there with provinces and territories as they work to combat this terrible disease. And indeed, we see cases growing across the country, and it's alarming, Mr. Speaker, and Canadians have every right to be concerned. We also know there's a light at the end of the tunnel, Mr. Speaker. Canada has procured more doses of vaccine per capita than any other country in the world. And, Mr. Speaker, that light at the end of the tunnel should give us all hope. But in the meantime, Mr. Speaker, we'll work together in a Team Canada approach to make sure that we get through the next several months, together with the health and safety of Canadians and first and foremost.
Honorable.